Have you ever wondered why you can understand English but still feel invisible when you speak? Why your voice suddenly gets smaller, your thoughts disappear, and you don't sound like you? It's not because you need more vocabulary, it's because you've been trying to speak English without building the version of you who speaks it. Most people focus on grammar, fluency, sounding like a native, but no one teaches you the truth. You don't need better English, you need a stronger English identity. That second self inside you, the one who speaks slower, softer, more nervous, it's not fake, it's unfinished. And when you stop trying to perform and start letting that voice grow, something shifts in your tone, in your presence, in how the world responds to you. In this video, you'll go on a journey, a deep emotional journey through the science, psychology, and soul of your English voice. You'll hear stories that sound like your own, and you'll discover that confidence isn't something you wait for, it's something you practice, one sentence at a time. So if you're tired of sounding like a stranger in your own mouth, stay with me, because today you stop learning English to survive and start using it to become. He was sitting in a cafe trying to order a coffee in English, and something strange happened. The words came out, but they didn't feel like him. It was like hearing a stranger use his voice, flat, careful, almost scared. And in that moment, he didn't feel stupid, he felt lost. Who was this English version of him? Why did it sound so small, so unsure? That day, he didn't just hear bad English. He heard a voice trapped in fear. In his native language, he was witty, fast, confident, the kind of person who could crack a joke or tell a story without thinking twice. But in English, he became silent, bland, almost invisible. He noticed how his whole personality shrank, his gestures, his eyes, even the rhythm of his speech. And that gap between his two selves, it hurt. It was like watching his potential disappear in front of people he wanted to impress. He used to think the problem was grammar, or pronunciation, or vocabulary. But no, this wasn't about English. This was about identity. Why does my English feel fake? He asked himself. The answer came from deep inside. Because I haven't built my English self yet. I've only judged it. That hit hard. He realized he was treating English like a school subject, not like a second skin, and that mindset was slowly killing his confidence. That night, he looked in the mirror and said something strange out loud. My English self deserves space. It felt awkward, but also right, like he was giving birth to a new part of himself. He didn't want to just speak better. He wanted to feel alive in English, not robotic, not correct, real. That's when he knew English wasn't a skill. It was a version of him waiting to grow. So he started doing something unusual. Every morning before brushing his teeth, he'd speak out loud, not perfectly, but personally. He didn't care about mistakes. He spoke as his English self, letting that voice grow stronger each day. I love early mornings, he'd say. They feel like possibility, simple, honest. His voice began to change, not because of grammar rules, but because he stopped hiding. Then came the journal. Each night, he'd write 2 short paragraphs, one as himself in his native language and one in English. He called it Dual Diaries. At first, the English version felt flat, but over time it grew emotion, grit, soul. He realized something powerful. He didn't need translation. He needed permission. Permission to sound different, to be different. Because that English self wasn't fake, it was becoming real. The turning point came in a conversation with a stranger. He wasn't fluent, but he was present. He laughed, he shared, he showed up. And for the first time, someone didn't just understand his words. They felt his energy. That's when it clicked. Confidence doesn't come from speaking like a native. It comes from owning your second identity without shame. He no longer compared the 2 voices inside him. He honored both. His native voice was home, but his English voice, that was adventure, growth, possibility. And when he stopped judging it, everything changed. He wasn't just learning English anymore. He was becoming someone new, and that someone deserved to speak loudly, proudly, imperfectly. If you really want to sound insecure in English forever, there's a perfect recipe. First, try to act exactly like your native language self, even if you're still a beginner. Use big words, complex ideas, dramatic expressions, and then freeze in silence when you forget one word. It works every time. Instant embarrassment. That's the trick. Aim too high, too fast, and then punish yourself when you fall. Next step, perfection. Make it your religion. Don't speak until every sentence is polished like an exam answer. Overthink every word. Panic if your grammar's off. You'll soon become a quiet perfectionist. Always afraid, always waiting. While others grow by practicing, you'll stay silent, stuck in the prison of your own high standards. Ironically, your English will get worse, not better. Why? Because fear kills fluency faster than mistakes do. Another excellent tactic is to hide your emotions behind safe phrases. You know the ones, I'm fine. It's okay. No problem. Even when your heart is aching or your mind is racing. That way, no one ever really knows you. You sound neutral, forgettable. And over time, your English becomes emotionally flat, like a robot trying to pass a test, not a human trying to connect. And if you really want your English self to stay weak, avoid conversations. Dodge calls. Say, I'm tired, or maybe tomorrow. Convince yourself you're not ready. That way, your English identity never gets sunlight. It never grows. You protect your pride, but at the cost of your future. Your fluency becomes a fantasy, a version of you that lives only in your imagination, never in the real world. Let me tell you something honest. Insecurity loves safety. It loves hiding behind excuses, behind screens, behind fake busyness. But real confidence? It's born in the fire of awkward moments, a stutter, a pause, a laugh. That's how we grow, one imperfect conversation at a time. And no, it's not comfortable, but neither is staying stuck in a language cage for years. So here's the challenge. Speak one sentence today with no filter. Make it raw, make it real. Say, I feel nervous speaking English. That's power. That's honesty. That's how fluency begins. Not with perfect words, but with true ones. It's not about sounding smart. It's about sounding human. And humans don't learn by hiding. They learn by living. Try this. Go outside. Find one small opportunity and talk to someone. It doesn't have to be deep. Even a "Hi, how are you today" counts. But say it with your English self, not your scared self. Don't wait until you're fluent. Speak now, flawed, emotional, alive. That's how transformation begins. The words are just the surface. The courage underneath, that's what builds your new identity. Of course, you could ignore all this advice and keep chasing the illusion of perfect English in your head. But if you're still listening, something tells me you're ready to grow. And that means you're also ready for the next layer, the moment when someone else discovers their voice and everything begins to shift. She used to speak softly in English, like she was afraid of taking up space. At work meetings, her voice would fade. In social situations, she'd smile, nod, and avoid eye contact. But in her own language, she was electric, sharp, expressive, a leader. The disconnect was painful. Like she had two different souls living in the same body, one bold, the other shrinking. Her name was Una, and for years she believed that her English self was just a weaker version of who she truly was. Until one day, during a video call, someone interrupted her mid-sentence. Again, that tiny moment cracked something inside. She closed her laptop and whispered, "This isn't me." And for the first time, she stopped blaming English. She started wondering, what if I'm not lost in English? What if I've just never chosen who I want to be in it? That's when she started an experiment. She created a new version of herself, her English Una, a persona built not from fear, but from desire, confident, warm, curious. She gave this version a name, Luna. Luna didn't apologize before speaking. She didn't say, "Sorry, my English is bad." She made eye contact. She smiled like she belonged. At first, it felt like acting, but after a few weeks, It started feeling like becoming. Luna had a daily ritual. Each morning, she'd speak into her phone's voice recorder for 30 seconds. Not reading, not repeating, just speaking, free and unfiltered. "Today I feel excited," she'd say. "I'm becoming stronger." It was messy, imperfect, full of pauses, but it was hers. Those small sessions rewired her nervous system. Speaking English no longer meant performing, it meant expressing. The real transformation happened during a networking event. Yuna was terrified, but Luna showed up. She introduced herself. She asked questions. She laughed, even when she made mistakes. And people listened. Not because her grammar was perfect, but because her energy was present. That night she walked home smiling, not because she had impressed others, but because, for the first time, she hadn't abandoned herself in English. She started shadowing confident speakers, people whose voices had rhythm, intention, soul. She wasn't copying their accent, she was borrowing their energy. She'd play a podcast and repeat out loud, "I believe in my voice." It wasn't about sounding native, it was about sounding alive. Her English wasn't flawless, but it was fearless, and that made all the difference. One day, a colleague pulled her aside and said, "Your energy has changed." What happened? She smiled and said, "I stopped waiting to be fluent. I started becoming someone I respect." That's when she realized confidence doesn't follow language skills. It follows identity. The moment she stopped trying to be perfect and started being real, doors began to open. Yuna still had a long way to go in English, but now every sentence felt like a seed planted in her future. She wasn't just learning a language anymore. She was expanding her life. And the person she was becoming in English, that version of her, had a future far bigger than she imagined. But of course, that kind of growth doesn't just happen by accident. It starts with understanding the deeper psychology behind identity. Here's what most people don't realize. Your brain doesn't just store English like data, it builds emotional profiles around it. That's why you might speak fluently alone, but freeze the moment someone listens. It's not a grammar problem. It's a safety problem. Psychologists call this the double self effect. Bilingual people don't just translate, they shift. Their tone, their behavior, even their identity changes depending on the language they're using. When your brain doesn't feel safe, it shuts down. That's not weakness, it's biology. If your English self has only ever been exposed to judgment, awkwardness, or humiliation, your nervous system will associate speaking English with danger. So the next time you say, "I can't speak well when I'm nervous," remember, it's not your fault. Your brain is doing its job, protecting you. But here's the good news, that protection can be rewired. The rule is simple. Identity grows where there is safety. That's why people speak fluently with pets, babies, or alone in the shower. There's no threat, no risk of shame, just space. If you want to grow your English self, create safe repetition. Talk to yourself, record voice notes. Speak while walking alone. Every time you do this, you're telling your brain, "Hey, this is safe now, you can relax." One woman I coached had a brilliant vocabulary, but she couldn't say a full sentence in public without shaking. I asked her to speak to her phone for 60 seconds every night, as if talking to a best friend. No script, no correction, just raw thoughts. After 2 weeks, her voice changed. Not because she learned new words, but because her body started trusting English. Her identity was becoming grounded. Another key concept is the self-concept gap. This is the painful space between who you are in your native language and who you feel like in English. Most learners get stuck here. They feel fake or dumb in English, not because they are, but because their English self is still a child, while their native self is an adult. And comparing the two only makes the gap wider. Healing begins when you stop judging your beginner self. That's why it's powerful to speak as your beginner self on purpose. For 1 minute today, talk like you did when you first started. Make the same mistakes. Laugh at yourself. Let go of pressure. This practice creates compassion between your two identities. It tells your brain it's okay to be in progress, And when your brain feels accepted, it stops blocking your voice. Eventually, something beautiful happens. Your two selves begin to integrate. You stop saying, "This is me" in English and "that's me" in my language. You just say, "This is me." And that version of you, it's richer, more expressive, more multidimensional than you ever imagined. English doesn't replace you. It expands you, but only if you stop hiding either side of yourself. Of course, integration doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen with every honest sentence, every small risk, every safe repetition. And once you experience that merging of identity, something else awakens, a deeper realization, one that forces you to confront a much more existential question. What if this English personality isn't fake at all? Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Most people think their English self is fake, a mask, an incomplete version of who they really are. But what if that's not true? What if this other voice you're building is actually a door to the parts of you you've never allowed to speak, not because you couldn't, but because you were afraid of what they might say? English doesn't just give you a second voice, it gives you a second chance. In your first language, you learned who to be. You followed the rules, adapted to culture, maybe even hid parts of yourself to survive. But in English, especially if you're still learning, nobody knows your past. Nobody holds expectations. It's like a blank canvas. And that freedom, it can be terrifying. Because deep down, you're not just learning words. You're facing a version of yourself that has always wanted to be born. That's why speaking English feels emotional sometimes. It's not just about vocabulary. It's about vulnerability. You hesitate, not because the word is hard, but because the sentence is honest. You say, "I feel lonely," and suddenly you feel exposed. That's not weakness, that's growth. Emotional exposure is a sign your English self is not fake. It's real, maybe even more real than the mask you've worn for years. Shame often shows up disguised as grammar fear. But the truth is, you're not ashamed of making a mistake. You're ashamed of being seen in a new form. In English, you can't rely on your old tricks, sarcasm, fancy words, fast thinking. So what's left? Just you, raw, simple, honest. And sometimes, that's the scariest part, not sounding different but being different. One learner once wrote, "I'm afraid my English voice makes me sound soft." I asked, "Soft or finally free?" He stared for a long time. Then he whispered, "Maybe this is the first time I've allowed myself to sound human." That's the shift. The fear isn't English. The fear is discovering who you are when you don't have a mask. But that's also where power lives. Try this. Write one English sentence you've never dared to say, something vulnerable, like, "I feel invisible in this world," or "I want someone to believe in me." Then say it out loud, not to impress, just to express. That's where your fluency starts, not in perfection but in truth. And truth, even in broken English, speaks louder than flawless lies. Your English self is not pretending, it's emerging. And when you stop judging it, you realize this isn't a fake version of you. This is the future you've been holding back. The artist, the leader, the storyteller, the person who speaks with clarity, with depth, with feeling. You've just been hiding behind your native voice for so long. You forgot you could be more. So maybe English isn't just a skill. Maybe it's a mirror. And when you finally look into it without fear, you see a version of you that's ready to lead a different life. But for that to happen, your brain has to do more than translate. It has to transform. And that's where neuroscience begins to explain what your soul has always known. Your brain doesn't grow through grammar. It grows through rhythm, sound, emotion. Every time you repeat an English phrase with feeling, your brain isn't just memorizing, it's rewiring. That's why music gets stuck in your head. It's not logic, it's melody. And the same goes for your English self. It's born not in textbooks, but in sound waves that vibrate with meaning. There's a reason you can remember an emotional sentence from a movie, but not a definition from a dictionary. It's called the emotion-to-language connection. When your body feels something, joy, anger, fear, and it's paired with language, your brain lights up. The phrase sticks. It becomes part of you. That's why shadowing exercises aren't just good practice. They're identity training. Try this now. Listen to a sentence spoken with depth, like I am stronger than my past, and repeat it slowly, matching the tone, the rhythm, the pauses. Not as a student, as a speaker, as a creator. Do this daily with 3 phrases tied to emotion. Over time, your brain won't just remember them, it will believe them. And that belief changes the way you speak and the way you see yourself. There's another principle that's rarely talked about: state-dependent retrieval. It means your emotional state controls how well you speak. If you're anxious, your brain literally blocks access to the words you know. If you're calm, the words flow. That's why confidence is more about breath than vocabulary. The next time you're stuck, don't study harder. Relax your shoulders. Inhale deeply, then speak one slow line. You'll be surprised what returns. Fluency is not built by forcing, it's built by rhythm and safety. And that rhythm, your personal English rhythm, becomes like a heartbeat, a signature. It's not about copying natives, it's about owning your sound, your voice, your pauses. When learners stop performing and start embodying their English, something sacred happens. Their words stop sounding learned, they start sounding lived. One man I worked with practiced a phrase every morning: I speak with confidence. At first it felt fake, but after 2 weeks of repeating it slowly, clearly, emotionally, his voice changed. Not because of the sentence, but because of the ritual. Neuroscience shows that repetition plus emotion plus identity. And in language learning, identity is everything. So what if your English self is like a song still being written? The grammar is the structure, but the rhythm, that's your personality, that's your courage, that's your memory of all the moments when you chose to speak, even when afraid. And the more you sing that song, even imperfectly, the more your brain believes, this is who I am now. That's the beauty of emotional repetition. It doesn't just teach English, it transforms the self. And once your brain starts syncing your emotions with your language, something shifts in how the world hears you. But more importantly, it shifts how you hear yourself. And that's when people stop just listening to your English. They start feeling your presence. You can tell when someone's just speaking English and when someone is speaking as themselves in English. The difference is energy, presence. When a person owns their English personality, it's not just about words anymore. It's about connection. Their voice feels grounded, their sentences carry weight, and even with simple language, people listen, not with their ears, but with their attention. I remember watching a quiet student give a short talk in English. Her grammar wasn't perfect. She used basic words, but the room was silent. Why? Because every sentence was filled with breath, with intention. She didn't rush, she didn't shrink, she paused, she looked up, she owned her space. People didn't just hear her, they felt her. And that, more than fluency, is what made her powerful. The key is emotional clarity. When you build your English self with honesty, your words stop sounding like translations. They start becoming stories. You're no longer just saying phrases, you're communicating feelings, and feelings are what people remember. Think about it. When someone says, I'm grateful for today, and means it, it hits differently than a perfect sentence said with no heart. Try telling a small story today, nothing dramatic, just one real moment in English, like, yesterday I walked alone and remembered my childhood. Say it slowly, honestly. Let your tone match your memory. That's how you train your English self to carry emotion, not by learning harder words, but by letting your real self speak through simple ones. There's something called the authenticity effect. It's when people trust you, not because your English is impressive, but because your energy is congruent. When your voice and your emotions match, people feel safe with you. They lean in. They respect your presence. This is how quiet voices become unforgettable, not through volume, but through truth. One learner told me, I always thought I needed to sound smarter to be respected. I told her, you don't need bigger words. You need deeper alignment. The next week, she stopped memorizing business phrases and started practicing breath work before meetings. Just 1 minute of breathing, then speaking, slowly, from her center. Her co-workers said, you sound more real now. The shift isn't external, it's internal. When you stop chasing performance and start embracing presence, your English self becomes magnetic. People respond to your confidence, not because it's loud, but because it's honest. And when that happens, something amazing unfolds. You don't just gain fluency, you gain credibility. You become someone people trust. So go ahead, use your English in a space that scares you a little. Maybe it's a cafe, a new group, a voice message. Don't wait to be perfect. Just show up as your evolving self. Because when your English self becomes real, the world begins to respond to you differently, and this realization leads to one final, life-changing truth. She sat there staring at her reflection, wondering, why do I feel ashamed when I speak English? And for the first time, she didn't blame her accent, she didn't blame her country. The answer was simple and heartbreaking. Because I've been judging a baby version of myself. Every time she stumbled, she whispered, you should be better by now. But babies don't run before they crawl, and identity doesn't grow under shame. Then came the shift. I allow myself to grow. She said it softly. At first it felt fake, but something in her body relaxed, like her English self had been waiting for permission to be loved in progress. That night, she spoke for 60 seconds straight. No editing, no rehearsing, just one honest minute of expression. It was messy. But it was hers, and it marked the beginning of everything. What changed me? She asked weeks later. It wasn't a course, it wasn't new vocabulary, it was the decision to express, not perform. That changed everything. She stopped waiting for approval. She stopped trying to impress. She just showed up. And in that showing up, her English self began to bloom, not as a perfect flower, but as a living thing. Her voice grew stronger. Her pauses became intentional. She started asking better questions. She stopped saying sorry for her English. She even laughed at her own mistakes. She realized she wasn't trying to be native anymore. She was trying to be authentic. And that shift gave her something even fluency couldn't: freedom. So who was she becoming? Not a duplicate, not a version, but a whole person. A bilingual identity. Grounded in presence, shaped by intention, guided by connection. In her native language, she felt at home. In English, she felt awake, and that balance, that inner dance, made her dangerous in the best way, unshakable, expressive, confident. She looked in the mirror again and said it with strength, my English self is strong, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, and because it was hers. She built it, breath by breath, word by word, like a sculptor shaping clay, not from fear, but from vision. And what she saw, a future she once thought belonged to someone else. Now every night before bed, she recorded one short message in English, just her voice, her thoughts, her growth. She didn't post it. She didn't show it to anyone. But over time, those messages became a kind of sacred journal, a mirror, a map, a memory of who she was becoming, one sentence at a time. Because that's the final truth no one tells you. Your English personality isn't something you find. It's something you build. And once you build it, it becomes the bridge between the person you've been and the life you're finally ready to live. So now you know. Your English personality isn't something you're waiting to find. It's something you build, word by word, breath by breath, just like confidence, identity, and self-respect. But let me ask you something real. How long will you keep judging the most fragile, brave part of yourself? How much longer will you hide your voice behind the excuse of, I'm not ready? Because you are ready, not to be perfect, but to be present, to speak not with fear, but with feeling, to let the world feel you, not just your words. What if English wasn't a subject anymore, but a bridge to the version of you you've always wanted to become? Think about that. And tell me in the comments, what does your English self want to say to the world right now? What version of you is waiting to grow through this language? Let's talk about it. Let's build it together. If this message touched something inside you, subscribe to the channel, click the like button, leave your comment below, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story that could change the way you speak and the way you live. This isn't just about English anymore. This is about you.